Madam Speaker, we just came out of a long night in the Rules Committee. I say we, on a member side, we were out of there by midnight. I have not asked the Rules Committee staff yet when they got out of there last night because I didn't really want to know the answer to that. When we meet in the Rules Committee on appropriations bills, you know we're in for long nights. My first year in Congress, Madam Speaker, you may have been following it at the time. When the big Republican majority came in, as the new big Democratic majority has come in now, and the appropriations season hadn't been finished. And so we were, the first order of business when we came in as a new majority was to take on the appropriations challenge. Well, it seemed crazy at the time. But what we decided to do, this is a mini bus, a group of 4 bills together. What we decided to do was to take the entire discretionary account of the entire United States of America, bring it down here to the House floor, and consider it under an open rule. I brought a copy of that rule down with me, Madam Speaker. It was H-Res 92. You heard the reading clerk read this morning. It took Joseph a while to get through that. Back then, again, we're only considering a small fraction of the budget today. Back then, we were considering the entire federal budget, and it was right here in 3 pages. The truth is, the part that dealt with the appropriations bill is only one of these sections. The other 2 were housekeeping business. We allowed the entire body to bring their ideas to the table to see what might stick. I say it was a radical idea because I'd just gotten to Congress. It turns out, and I went back and looked at the numbers historically, turns out it didn't used to be a radical idea. We've made it a radical idea to let all the amendments come to the floor. Now, again, my friend from Massachusetts has a very hard job as chairman of the Rules Committee. I introduced an amendment last night, Madam Speaker, barely before the committee ended, after I'd had a chance to question the cardinals who were responsible for that language. And my friend from Massachusetts made it in order. He's doing everything he can to try to make the process more open than it has been in the most recent past. But if we go back a little bit further, if we think about how to change the culture in this institution, it hasn't always been this divided. Do you remember the first year that Speaker Pelosi sat in the chair that you're sitting in right now, Madam Speaker? She was the first of you, as you recall, first Democratic speaker since 1994, first woman to ever lead this institution. When she sat in that chair, for the very first time, we had an open appropriations process. There were about 110 Democratic amendments that were offered, about 300 Republican amendments. Because when you're in the minority, it's harder to get your agenda in the underlying bill. When you run the show like Mr. McGovern does, you're able to get all your good ideas in the bill. I have no doubt that every one of Mr. McGovern's good ideas is contained in this underlying bill. That's the privilege of leadership. When you sit on the outside, like I do, like Mr. Starber does, it's harder to get your ideas in. So historically, as Speaker Pelosi did in 2007, more amendments are made in order for the minority party than are made in order for the majority party, because the minority party hasn't gotten a chance to influence the process. I'm proud, over the 8 years that I was a part of the majority party here and had the privilege of sitting on the Rules Committee, we made more than half the amendments for any, on average, across all the bills, were given to the minority party. But in this bill, Madam Speaker, again, despite the chairman's best efforts, the minority party received less than a quarter of the amendments that are available. What I'm saying is, when Republicans were doing this from their leadership spot and we were giving more amendments to the other side, now the majority party is giving not 100% more amendments to their side, not 200% more, but more than 200% more. By my statistics, last time around, we've moved in the right direction. It used to be 300% more amendments given to the majority party. I don't say that to grouse about sour grapes. Again, I say it with sincerity when I tell you that what Chairman McGovern is doing on the Rules Committee, he's doing out of a real love of this institution. trying to reopen the process. But we've got to find a way to trust ourselves. Most of what you heard the reading clerk read had nothing to do with the amendment of the bill we're talking about. It had to do with closing down the process in many ways for the very first time in my congressional career, because the minority party, Republicans, are frustrated that we haven't been able to fund humanitarian needs on the border. Now, I know talking about the border is a dog whistle to many folks in this institution. They think, as you heard the gentleman from Massachusetts mention, that it's about the wall and it's about immigration and it's about all sorts of things that it's not. What we're talking about are children that are in the custody of the United States of America, rightly or wrongly, like it or not. That's where we are today. And we can either fund the needs of those children, we can either fund the health care of those children, we can either fund the education of those children, or we cannot. And what we've heard from this administration is the same thing we heard from the Obama administration when we had this very same crisis in 2014, and that's that we don't have enough resources to provide for the flood of folks who've been taken into U.S. custody. White House made this request 6 weeks ago, knowing that we were going to run out of money this month. And the House has taken no action on that request. When we had the very same Rules Committee hearing last week, Madam Speaker, that we had this week, my friend the chairman talked about his sincere desire to move this kind of legislation, but it hasn't moved. My friend from California, who sits on the majority side of the Rules Committee and serves on the Appropriations Committee, talked about the meeting they had in the Appropriations Committee that day to move this in an expedited way, and yet it has not yet moved. The reason the rule considers these measures to close down the parliamentary process here is because folks are rightfully frustrated with the flow of the floor. We have serious work that we need to do, and when you're in procedural nonsense, you don't get any of that work done. But that procedural nonsense comes from a very sincere frustration that we have very real needs that are shared needs, very real passions that are shared passions, and that the consequences of failure affect us all. It affects who we are in our individual districts. It affects who we are as a nation. And for the life of me, I cannot understand why it is that this issue is receiving the neglect that it is from the leadership party. We're going to talk about that in our previous question amendment. If we defeat the previous question, we'll bring up an amendment to add to the rule language that will allow us to have this important debate and provide these important funds. I'll reserve the time to talk about that, Madam Speaker, but I do want to say we had ample opportunity in the Rules Committee to make the process wide open, and that decision, candidly, is above the chairman's pay grade, and the process was not allowed to be an open process. So then we also had ample opportunity to close the process down completely. That is completely within the chairman's pay grade. He rejected that idea and made the effort to take some very important steps forward into returning us to regular order, and for that I'm grateful.